That was dope.
What up? What up?
All right, everybody, back from Breaking Bread or for Breaking Bread.
Yep.
As you can see, we have new camera angles.
Yep. I'm sharing, so hopefully everybody else is sharing on their page as well. So yeah, Joe could talk a little bit about the aesthetic. You know, he'll say I share too much, but we want you guys to come on this journey with us. So Joe, talk a little bit to the new setup or the vision that you had for the setup.
Well, for me, you know, looking at just critiquing our work that we've done so far, I believe we have great conversations. I believe we have knowledge behind what we're speaking about, but I believe we're missing the opportunity for that up close, personal feel behind it, and that's kind of the angle that I want to go at. Now, anybody that's interested in doing like production work for free, want to come out and like
help us out,
you know, shoot face-to-face shots and highlight certain things. We're open for it, but that's what I wanted to do. I wanted us to get closer so people could see, be a little bit more intimate with our audience.
So let's keep the spirit of that thought and the spirit of transparency first and foremost. Just want to say, I'll use a little bit of the corporate rhetoric, which kind of goes into the talk a little bit today. Feedback is a gift. So please feel free to share any feedback, positive, negative. There's a learning associated in each. So kind of to Joe's point, as we're evolving this process, you guys are going on this journey with us. So if there's feedback that you could share that you believe can make these conversations a little bit more intimate, a little bit more engaging, definitely share those thoughts with us. Clearly, neither Joe or I have an ego. So whatever thoughts that you have that you can contribute, kids looking side eye. I do have a little bit of ego. But yeah, any thoughts that you believe that can contribute to kind of the overall experience of the conversation, definitely share those. So we kind of teed up what we wanted to talk about today. So for those that hadn't looked at the page yet, I welcome you to look at it. We posted a couple articles. But today's conversation is going to be around code switching. But we want to kind of hit it from a different angle. So we don't want it to be kind of a monotonous conversation on what code switching is and a traditional conversation. There's one thing that I thought, kind of Joe and I, in sharing texts and thinking about today's conversation. Joe had been doing some work on another one of his initiatives that I would love him to talk about who we are. And Joe and I also kind of did a conversation when Black Panther came out. We had the opportunity to speak to some youth around being comfortable taking who we are in the different places that we go. So what Joe and I would like to try to do today around this conversation of code switching is really have a conversation on who we are and find out a little bit more from the audience, for those that are participating in the conversation, who you are. And then let's have a conversation on, based upon who we are and kind of how we define ourselves, do we feel comfortable taking our full selves in all the different places that we might go?
Right, and should we take our full selves? Because, I mean, some things that make me who I am, I probably shouldn't share in different spots with specific audiences. So I guess that's part of it, too. I went to a conference, I want to say earlier this year, and it was a human resource related conference. And one of the topics that the speaker had presented was the idea of covering. To me, it's the same thing as code switching, but I think it's more so from a visual, physical standpoint, where I may be a type of way, and because I want the specific job, I change up the way I look or present myself in an interview, including the code switching in the way I communicate with somebody, and then that hopefully increases my chances to get the position. And then I pretty much have to either live out that expectation for at least 3 to 6 months until I can ease
your real version.
Real version back into like the space that I'm working in.
So for the nature of the conversation today, when we're talking about code switching, and it's more within the characteristics of how we present ourselves to the marketplace.
Okay.
Right. So how we present ourselves in the presence of the different places that we as individuals might be. Would you agree?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay.
Right.
And then kind of to Joe's point, should you, just because you can, should you maintain that same persona, if you will? Or is there, the playoff when keeping it real goes wrong. Like, should you, just because you can, should you maintain that same level of persona?
Because there's checks and balances, in my opinion. So I'm gonna just jump in with my opinion.
So go ahead.
And anybody that's listening, you know, we always asking for your 2 cents. You know, your comments, questions, thoughts. And hey, I don't know if we've asked this before, but share this with other people in your network. Because again, the more people we bring to the table, that's breaking bread. The more insight we get, we learn, as well as with you guys.
Yeah.
But you know, from just thinking about marketing, branding, design.
So before you jump in, who are you? So like, so that we can get to why you think those ways. So who are you? How do you define yourself?
And that's a tricky question too, right? Because some of us go into like your job title, others go into personality traits. I guess I'm gonna take it. You know, I am a creative. At the core of who I am, I believe, and I call myself the creative evangelist. Thanks, Rob Dunham, who actually named me that. But at the core of me, I'm a problem solver, I'm a creative, and I can execute my creative ideas. I do that in different ways. I do it at Discover Card as an employment brand strategist, consumer engagement specialist. I also do it Breaking Bread, just trying to come up with different ideas to push us to market. But I mean, so that I don't ramble, I say I am a creative. Okay. I'm a creative, executor, and problem solver.
Okay. So
now, who are you then, man? Shoot.
So since you want to credit the person that gave you your title, I'm gonna credit my boy Troy Neal, who kind of shared. I am a curator of thoughts and innovation. So I really pride myself on being a connector and connecting different ideas and processes. So whether that's in the business setting or kind of socially, I believe myself to be a curator, one that's always trying to bring people, ideas, thoughts together, i.e. a Breaking Bread, for instance, right? So that if I am thinking about my persona now, there's pieces of my persona that I would say, if not to speak about myself in third person, Rob Smith is known to say the wrong thing at the wrong time. Like I'm known for putting my foot in my mouth.
Why wrong?
Why? That's a good question. Impulsive thoughts.
Okay.
Impulsive without a thoughtfulness of the potential consequences, positive and or negative, or how it might make others feel.
Okay. So code switching, covering. Is that an opinion? Is that?
So for me, I say that I'm mindful of that. So when I think about from the code switching standpoint, when I'm around my friend group, like my circle, I'm more prone to be my authentic self. In the business setting, because I occupy a certain seat and I occupy a certain title, I have to be thoughtful of the words that I say and its impact to the others around me and how I potentially influence them.
To me, that's strategy. Now, is that code switching or is that strategy?
So again, if we're talking about how we present ourselves to others, I say it's code switching only because I don't want people in the business setting. I don't want a word to describe me to be Rob is reckless.
Okay.
But to my friend group, I'm a little bit more comfortable being that wild card. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense.
Yep. So, I mean, all right, let's think about this. If you guys have comments, I would like to know how many areas do you believe you have to code switch in, just in general life, or cover, you know, like change the way you look or present yourself. How many spaces or environments would you have to do that? I say off the top of my head, there's at least 3.
Yeah.
For me.
So what are your 3?
Work. Again, family and friends. Don't hate me, man.
Go ahead.
If y'all judge me, that's on you. You got to give an account to God. But church, I think I do a little bit closer.
I'm gonna go your 3, and I'm gonna add one more. I'm gonna go a little deeper with family.
Okay.
I would say family, and then as a husband as well.
So you're breaking down, okay? Because I grouped family and friends. You're breaking that into sub-segments, or are you saying?
So I would say, and Kia's looking at me side-eye again.
No, I'm just clarifying. In-laws.
No. In-laws too. Yes, that's actually a good one. So in-laws, I Ooh,
As a spouse.
as a spouse, but I do think, from the in-law standpoint, I do recognize that it's taken me a long time to get to a place of being, and I'm still not 100% comfortable. I'm probably 95% comfortable.
I can dig.
But Takia, as my spouse, my wife, the mother of my child, I do have to be mindful of what I say and how I act at times. Now, I will say,
I guess I do that too.
I let my guard down a lot, so I'm not always 100%.
Meaning you're vulnerable.
I'm vulnerable, but it is even when I'm vulnerable, sometimes it's a conscious thought to be vulnerable.
Okay, let's do this too. Kia, could you look up the definition of code switch just while we thinking through that?
Yeah.
All right, because
So
I did.
can you repeat the question? Because we have a couple of people that just joined.
What? Okay, for the new people who joined, let's shout them out.
I'm scared to touch because I don't want to.
All right.
Radiette and Randall.
Radiette, Randall, thanks for joining us. We're excited that you're here. All right, the question is, how many environments, and then list those environments that you feel like you have to code switch.
And we're looking at what the official definition of code switching is. But the way that we've been talking about it is how we present ourselves. So the nature of which we're talking about is the different versions of how we present ourselves to others.
Because and mark me if I'm wrong, and she's looking it up. There are two forms of this. One is a physical, one is communication. Code switching is the communication part. In HR, they call it covering, and that's the physical part. Mm-hmm. All right, so I do the same thing. With my wife, I am a certain way around her as well. I communicate a certain way around her as well, and I'm gonna tell you why though. And it could be code switching 100%, but A, some of the jokes, some of the things I say, I don't know if she can handle, and then B, I do respect her. I kind of respect her to a point where. Some of the stuff I say with a lion, mm-hmm. I call guys lions. So some of the stuff I say with a lion, and we can just laugh it off. I just wouldn't do it. Say it to a certain group.
Agreed, but I don't think there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
So, but that's just my 2 cents. So.
So, all right, let's leave it at that. Yeah. Code switching.
So, code switching, the practice of alternating between two or more languages or varieties of language in conversation.
Okay. So I think sometimes I do that. I think that's part me though.
Yeah.
All right. So anyone code switch, let us know. As a matter of fact, second question or second list item. Write down a brief example of where you have to, how you code switch, how you again change language in a specific setting.
Well, I think in this the one that for me the obvious that I think most minorities deal with is in a corporate setting. The idea of engaging and interacting with colleagues to maintain a sense of professionalism. So meaning the way that I interact with my colleagues and how I exchange ideas, thoughts, and communicate essentially would be different than how I talk to my homies or to my boys.
And what's funny, I believe even other racial groups are being forced in this society today to code switch. Because I know there's certain languages you would use, again, with your family, friend, business, that you kind of take into account when you're around a different group.
Yeah, my only problem with that, though, is, and this is, I'm going to go from a slide tangent.
I was calling universal.
Yeah, is the adaptation of certain lingo to once it becomes trendy, we can market it and make money off of it, but yet it's still not socially acceptable to be used in the marketplace. So, kind of example, the word of the moment now is, everybody, it's lit, right? So you'll see people using it in marketing and engaging ways like that. But would people have that same level of comfort in engaging using it's lit if they're in a business meeting at work?
And would that be a problem? Would that be considered reckless?
Or non-professional?
Or non-professional. Now, do we believe like millennials, just this force of, if you would call it nature from this generation coming into the marketplace? Do you think which I do believe that they're helping kind of break down those barriers of code switching and covering?
Yeah, I do. Well, I do agree. I think in addition to that, though, is when you have people that have cultural different backgrounds and, for a lack of using a better word, have a native tongue, right? So how they might speak amongst their family one way, how they might speak amongst their friend group in one way, and then what is deemed to be professional lingo.
Now, what if you're too ignorant to even know you need to code switch?
That's a real thing, though.
I know.
That's a real so.
And I didn't mean to use the term ignorant, but I'm just saying lack of knowledge.
You haven't been exposed, right? So if you think about, and I'm sure you've been in this as a hiring manager, looking at some people's resumes, and the resumes maybe aren't not, I don't want to say formatted, but there's language used in the resume outside of just grammar that you just kind of looking like, do you realize like this is a professional environment?
Right. Even down to sometimes people use emails, and you guys will laugh. Now, I'm not a hiring manager. I deal with the marketing side of and branding side of the employment. But you are exposed to some of the resumes, and you see people use email address like Big Booty Susie or All Black Negroes or blah 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 as the professional email address, which becomes like a laughing situation. But that's not necessarily code switching, though. That's just would you call that ethics?
Well, so the same question that you gave me, Kelly, come join us at the table.
Come on, Kelly.
So the same question that you posed to me, why do we feel the need that somebody would have to change their email address? Like if Big Booty Judy at gmail.com is her email address, and that's the one she's been using since she was 15.
Right.
Now that she's trying to enter the workforce, why do we feel the need? Why do we believe she should have to change it?
Standards?
Whose standard?
Just the culture standard. I guess that's just the way things are.
But is that right?
Dang.
I mean, so I'm
answering to Kelly getting her seat though,
and I'm really interested on this because Kelly knows I clown her a lot. Because Kelly says she grew up in the same neighborhood as me, but she went to a very different high school. We always have these conversations about where she grew up versus what high school she went to. So,
did y'all hear? Sorry.
Come on,
did y'all hear
Jonas.
Radiette's comment?
No, we didn't. I'm scared to touch it.
Okay.
This is Kelly.
What up, Kelly? This is my first time meeting Kelly. She was at one point typing, and then she just walked in the door. So I don't know how that happened. I'm teasing.
So what was Radia's comment?
So welcome, Kelly. Okay, so Radiat says, as an Ethiopian American, code switching is absolutely necessary and even more normal, especially when speaking native tongue in the midst of non-Ethiopians. So I'm not sure why it's seen as any differently when the spectrum of American English language provides space for code switching.
You know, it's funny. I forget, was it the video that Pam posted that's on the page? The English language as we speak it versus if you was from the UK.
Yeah.
Like, so.
Should we have a standard? Should there be a standard, a way things are done? This is how, again, that could change. The nuances could change. But do you guys believe that there must be a way or an order in which you have to comply with in order to get things done? Period. This is the process. Again, it can be adjusted. However, in order for us to be successful, we have to have a unified front. The unification is the American language. I'm just using that as an example, or wearing a suit, or
whatever the social norms are. Social norms.
And I'm sorry, I'm late, so y'all may have already covered this.
But
good. In terms of assimilation, I think that's a term that I've heard a lot, even in the media, when they were referring to the immigration. I don't want to say problem, but the immigration issue within the United States. And one of the things one of the senators said from one of the southern states was, we don't have a problem with immigration. They just need to assimilate into our culture. And I think that that's what's been ingrained and embedded in our society in terms of to make everyone else, back to your point, feel comfortable.
So I guess we had talked about assimilation. I love that you brought that up. So my question is, can you value diversity and inclusion when you're forcing people to assimilate?
No, I don't think so.
Joe? Can you value diversity and inclusion if the goal is to assimilate everybody into the same culture? So if we think about
I don't think authentically you could. I don't think you could do it authentically, and I don't think you could do it completely. Does that make sense? I mean, I could respect it, understand it, but I don't get the real. It's almost saying to me, if I dated someone just outside of what I'm accustomed to, and we're dating, but I'm saying, hey, when you get around me, you have to act, be, and think a certain way. You can still be yourself, but
I like you for you.
But for me, just listen. Do this.
I like you
say
better.
that. Do that. And then X months or X years later, be like, man, I'm so in love with this person when you haven't completely.
You don't know the real them.
Yeah.
You know the version of them that you manifested based upon your social norms or the vision that you need.
Right. But on the back end of that, I have to make them act, think, and do and be that way because in my circles, that's what has to be presented in order for us to get to the next level. Or get this thing accomplished. What is priority in this case? So I'm just.
I keep going back to the idea of like you need all kinds of kinds, right? Meaning you need those that can assimilate and blend in, while you also need those that can be disruptive and kind of shake the foundation. I don't. In my truest opinion, I think whether we're talking as an institution, as a company, organization, or enterprise, or even as a country, nation, you need a balanced mix of a little bit of everything, right? Because I go back to social norms are based upon, in my head, like the ruling of the land, like it's creating a sense of normalcy, right? So we all have to buy in a governance and a rule of accountability that we're all going to move by. Now, as long as we all had equal voices at creating what those governance rules are, then we all should be able to buy into that, right? So I do think there's a piece of assimilating into whatever governance we have come into agreement on. Like as agreement for breaking bread, we're saying we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Are we all in agreement? Yes. All right. This is how we're going to move accordingly. So now there's a point of accountability that I can hold you on because we all agreed upon this, and now you're moving outside of that. Mm-hmm. Now, my challenge becomes, I would hope that in the coming together of whatever norms we're going to create for the way that we move and operate, that each individual felt comfortable being their authentic self to establish what those norms that we're gonna hold each other accountable to. So whether it's an organization, so as an organization we stand on these beliefs, these core values. Does everybody believe in that? Yep, we all believe in that. So now we can move forward. But I see less of a problem assimilating to that because we were all in agreement that this is what we said we were going to stand for versus this is what it is. You need to elevate yourself to this. And if you don't, you're in defiance.
Until my behavior, even though these are the core values, the way in which I show respect is putting my feet up on your table.
But I do, but again, like
that behavior.
I don't think there's nothing wrong with that too, because I think you need a little bit of defiance to push things forward. But you also need a little bit of people that are going to buy in and just do what needed to keep everything afloat. So that's what I'm saying. In my head, I don't want to be like Thanos, but I think it has to be a perfect balance. I don't say perfect. Things need to be in balance where there's not too much of this and not too much of that. But for me, the foundation is built upon everybody has an equal voice into whatever standard we're establishing.
Okay.
E.T. says assimilation. He said maybe it should be a potluck instead of a melting pot.
Potluck meaning we all sign up a list. You're going to bring the mac and cheese. You're going to bring the bread. I'm going to bring the plates because I don't want to cook.
People.
What to bring.
Yes.
That would be kind of interesting. That would be kind of interesting.
So, Joe, we only want you for your creators believe your blackness at home.
Right.
Okay?
Or because you're black, bring the fried chicken and chitlins. Because we know that's what your people like. Come on.
That's disrespect. Nah, yeah, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
Pam is adding assimilation is just another power structure. Hold on. I'm trying to read the full comment. It's not full. Sorry. Assimilation is just another power structure. It says the majority will only be able to remain comfortable and in power so long as we set the standard by which everyone must abide and call it a norm. If you stray from the standard, you're wrong.
Yeah. So I think that's where, I think this is where the problem for me comes into place. I think the social norms or the rules in which we are governed by, and I hate using the word governed, but I can't think of a better one right now, isn't often revisited frequent enough to keep up with the trend of whatever's going on. So like if a business is still running off of a model that they created in 1980 in 2018, I would argue that business probably, even if it is having some level of success, it's probably not being as successful as it could be had it evolved to adapting to the current landscape of 2018.
Chick-fil-A.
So build on that thought. What do you mean by Chick-fil-A?
And they are set on very strict Christian principles, which in which their organization was founded. And when their founder, when he actually made publicly the statement about how he felt about homosexuality, which in this landscape, in terms of just society in general, it's it's looked at a lot differently than, let's say, even when we were 10 years ago.
So my challenge to that is I don't disagree, but in the nature of having fruitful conversation, one would argue that if they were flexible on their views, they could be opening their potential sales to a whole a whole nother part of the demographic that they potentially are alienating right now. So as a nature of that, if just 10% more came in, you would see an increase in sales. It would be lifted. So although they might be comfortable with the level that they're at, you can make the argument about being more democratic. So right now we can say, just for easy math, say based upon the values that Chick-fil-A has established, they appeal to 6 out of 10 of the average American. But if they were a little bit more democratic, could they get to 8 out of 10? And then the question is, those 2 basis points, is it worth what they will be compromising?
Exactly. And that's what I was going to say. It might be a fair trade-off by saying I'm opening up my doors to that percentage that we're losing. I would lose my other base because of that. So they would end up.
But I think the beauty in Chick-fil-A, and like using them as an example, obviously, is that they don't feel the need to code switch. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. This is the line in the sand. Rock with us or don't. This is who we are.
You're right.
But if you do rock with us, you're going to enjoy this lemonade, and we got some bomb chicken sandwiches.
But then I guess it would change, because then that goes into principles, right?
But I would think principles are a part of why we code switch. If not for principles, why?
Because sometimes I believe core like there's a foundation of who you are that they're not concepts. They're principles. This is just who I am. Now I may not delineate. I may not flex on my principles. However, I might flex in the way in which I communicate them, display them.
So transition that thought to the reasons why you do that. So like the whole, if when keeping it real goes wrong. So like why are you now flexing it? So if principle based, Joe, your parents raised you to have these core principles and values.
Okay.
You're now making, based upon what we've understood code switching and covering to be, you're making a conscious decision to hold back a piece of who you are or to communicate in a certain way based upon X. What is the risk associated if you didn't hold that piece back?
It depends. So, okay, that can go so many different ways, but it would say, for instance, in a business meeting, I need something accomplished. I have certain core principles. that I stick to. Some of them you just won't bend on. You know, some of them, you know, ethics. You know, Joseph, it's your duty to steal this amount of credit card numbers from this group so that we can hit this number. You know what? Thank you guys for your time. I'm out. Right? So because that principle, that ethics, I'm just not going to bend on. However, if it was something like, I usually tell people what I think when they say something I don't like. But in this case, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I still believe it. I still hold true to that principle. And I really do have something to say to you. I just may not say it in this environment right now. And I may change the way I say it out of respect or whatever the case may be. That still doesn't mean I changed my principles. It's just, I just didn't deliver. You know, I just use code switching in a positive way, I guess.
But so
what are your thoughts?
I would argue to say you just discerned, you had discernment to say that the way that I need to show up in this moment is a little different based upon the intended result that I may be looking for.
Right, and that to me is not code switching.
I agree, Kelly.
Yeah, I agree. That's not code. I mean, I did that today. So.
Can we use that as a live example?
Key comment.
So Pam says, I don't think I code switch so much as I should for my comfort. I do it in my extended family as much as I do in the social settings. I don't always feel comfortable bringing my full self to the party, so sometimes I remain quiet when I actually have thoughts or ideas that I would like to share if I were in a different setting. I shift according to my desired level of comfort, not so much others. But I do realize that I'm depriving others of an opportunity to grow while also depriving myself of an opportunity to be unconditionally accepted and loved.
I love that.
And and contribute to the that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
But I think to that, if you're naturally an introvert versus an extrovert, like there's certain people when they walk into a room, their presence present, like, you know, the person that loves the sound of their voice. And what role, like, I wouldn't imagine that to be code switching either. Like, if I'm naturally a quiet person, like say to Pam's point, maybe she just naturally is a shy individual. I'm not saying Pam is shy. How do you discern the differences between, like, just I'm naturally a little bit more timid or shy, so I'm not making the conscious decision to not be my authentic self. It's just based upon my comfort level.
Kelly?
He stopped me on that one. I don't know.
Well, I mean, so watch this. I'm naturally shy, but in order for me to be respected in this corporate workplace, they tell you add value on this conference call.
Pam says she is shy. Sorry.
Add value in this conference call.
Not the Pam I know.
Add value to this in this conference call, in this meeting.
Yeah.
Though I'm shy, if I'm trying to accomplish something and I have to play the game, you know, which part of me am I leaning on? Am I going to lean on the shyness, or am I going to lean on the competitiveness to accomplish a goal? Which it's still me,
but it's still code switching, because I think code switching is adapting. In the way my mind's eye thinks about it, it's adapting to the environment to get whatever intended result that you want. So I might have a seat at this table, and in order to maintain my seat at this table, I need to be able to support my being at that table. I can't support my being at that table if the social norm is based upon my ability to vocalize my thoughts, because I can't rely solely on the merit of my actions, right? But even I would think at some point your actions, others are going to be curious, and you have to be able to support or defend why you do what you do, right? So that's the way I kind of go in that standpoint. But then the offset is, and I've worked with a lot of people that throughout my career, so are less about their name being known. They're just a head down, get stuff done type of individual. They don't necessarily need the public praise or accolation. They're not aspiring to be in leadership. This is their career. They're very proud about the work that they do. They show up from 9 to 5. They do their job. They go home. I think sometimes in a professional corporate setting, we also measure individuals' commitment level based upon how much they assert themselves versus I'm very pride in the principle of the work that I deliver. But to be honest, this is only but a piece of who I am. From 9 to 5, XYZ company might get this, but my real passion is my family. My real passion is my side hustle or whatever else. So I think that's where I struggle with code switch, because I may be showing up and presenting myself in this form based upon how I want, because of who I want to be in other places. So I may not want to be that individual here, because my passion and my belief or values are really based upon, like, how many people do we know do bare minimum at work but give 100% at church?
Right.
True.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, but you would say if somebody that from work saw this person at church, that's the same person, because that same energy, they don't bring that to the 9 to 5 every day. So I just think sometimes we adjust how we work or how we show up based upon the results that we want.
So code switching now is starting to be like a tool.
Right.
I think so. I mean,
Instead of like the negative spin that some people could put on it, or culture could put on it, it could actually become a tool used for your advantage.
I think it goes back to your comfort level, though. To Bam's point, like I pride myself, at least, in trying to be an individual that even though I may communicate differently, the essence of who I am, I try to maintain that same piece. Now, there are, and not to go a little too crazy, there are times that I'm very comfortable in who I am, that I might use language that I probably shouldn't use in certain environments, that I recognize that after saying it, because somebody is around it, like, Rob, you can't say that. Because in my eye, like, I'm being my authentic self. So without putting out the words, but
and it doesn't, and it might maybe don't jeopardize the quality of work you present. All of that, the other stuff.
But there's a piece of it that, again, not that I don't buy into the social norms. I really don't care. Like, so my validity isn't based upon what somebody thinks of me. Right. My value isn't measured based upon. So, but I'm cautious in the sense that I don't want my words to offend others, but I'm not willing to not say what I need to say for the sake of just protecting somebody else's. So, like, for me, I'm constantly in this balance of trying to keep what I want to say and how I want to show up for others. And it's so in the corporate world for me is, I don't want to walk in being the angry black guy because everything's going on in the world, but I also want to make sure that people know I have a conscience and I'm aware and I'm alert, and I have sensitivities to what's going on because it impacts and it affects me, and I can't just act like it's not happening. And I think there's a piece of, so whether we're talking, and I know two things you never bring to office place, politics and religion, but unfortunately in the environment that we're in, you throw in race into that third piece now. Those are major things that are influencing my state of being, right? So for me to act like those things aren't impacting me is not me being my authentic self either.
So how should there be a line? Like, could we become so that we want to bring our true selves in every area or facet of life that no line is created, and you just almost get chaos?
Right.
I mean, do you believe that is a possibility that will allow? Okay.
Well, I think that's a good point you bring up, but I also think we have to look at the flip side of that. By code switching, as we've defined it so far, too much, we become passive and allowing certain things to happen.
Yeah.
So you lose sensitivity to things like Rob mentioned in terms of hot things are really important right now, but we've become so okay with, let me not rock the boat, that those things don't get addressed and overlooked, and we end up at the opposite, in chaos, but in a different way.
I just wrote that down, desensitized. Like, the flip side of that is you become numb to what's going on because you don't want to ruffle anything, that you're now assimilating and blending in, that your passiveness means that you're almost in agreement.
Which then goes back to what you were saying earlier, which was if everyone agreed upon the social norms with me being passive and desensitized, I'm not contributing to what that future social norm would be, which then puts me in a position of not reaping the results of what it should have been if I would have participated and at least shown some type of Okay.
Comment skill?
2 comments. Radiant says, I'm not sure code switching is the issue as much as the reason why you code switch. Like I said earlier and Cam stated above, code switching can be necessary, even appropriate, depending on the context and the person or people you're speaking with. It's sometimes about the best. Oh, sorry. Sometimes it's about the best way to get the message across. I think the majority culture also code switches in terms of text talk versus face-to-face conversations, or sadly, boardroom versus locker room talk. And Pam says, yes, a tool, but I wonder what kind of people code switch. Does everyone do this or some form of it, no matter what race or gender? I think that's what makes it different.
I agree. I think we all have a tendency to do that. And Radiate, you're gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong because you know a little bit more about that. But I wrote down in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So depending on what you need in your life, say I'm in desperate need of love, which is just something that I've had the conversation with lately with some women, and they're so desperate for it, they have literally altered who they were so greatly. I mean, I call it a code switch because it's nothing in terms of what they were to attract and feel accepted so that they can gain that sense of love. So I just think it really just depends on the situation. I think we all have a tendency sometimes to do it depending on what the situation is. Being a part of groups, I was a part of a Bible study group that I know for a fact I code switched because I was trying to figure out how to navigate it without making people uncomfortable, about showing them, they already had their idea of what I was going to say, how I was going to act, how I was going to behave. But I wanted to prove to them, I'm educated, I'm smart, I'm successful in my own right, give me a chance. But I mean, at the end of the day, it didn't matter because their thoughts of me were what reigned supreme anyway. So this is a very interesting.
What was dope about what you just said was, it was funny you said I'm successful in my own right, and I think that's dope that you define it. Like I define that value for you, and I'm able, because I defined it. Rob didn't define it for me. No one else defined it for me, so it can't change. They can't change it. I'm gonna change it, or if I want to. But since I defined it, I could then determine how and which ways I would code switch, how and which ways I navigate, how and which ways I'll show myself, how much of that I'll show, because this I own.
Sense of ownership.
Yeah, I own it.
I think to Radia's point though, like I wrote down actions and results, and I just had this. I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and a consultant that came in said, if you get the results that you wanted, does it matter why people did what they did? So for me, and I kind of gave her the principle of, for me, it matters.
Yes.
So like, I want somebody's motives to be, the reason why somebody does something directly impacts how I feel about the results that I've got. Yeah. So I'm working on a project now that I'm trying to get leadership's buy-in. I want them to buy in not solely because of the business return on investment I'm showing, because there's a social conscience that says we should be doing this, right? Now, if I got the results without that social awareness, would I still be comfortable with the results? For me, the answer is no. I'm still glad that progress was made, but there's a little piece of me, if I'm being honest, that feels a certain type of way that they didn't buy into it because of it was the right thing to do. They bought in it because of the business opportunity, right? So for me, actions and results are directly connected to each other.
And then you run the risk of, like, if you're not doing it with and for the right reason, man, what's going to happen when, we have to, work together to make an even harder task happen? Now I'm worried about you put me in a position that...
motives matter.
Yeah, motives matter a lot to me. Yeah.
But it's funny, I love the example of the Bible study group. I'm notorious for this. We, within our care group, again, and I'll lead by saying, I really care less. Like, I'm not looking for anybody's acceptance at this stage in my life. Now, I will say I haven't been at this place my whole life. But I remember early on, like, care groups, being the guy that had a whole lot to say. But, like, nope, I ain't been going to church 30 years of my life, and I can't quote every Bible verse and tell you exactly where it is. So, like, I wouldn't be comfortable saying things. But what you will recognize is there's church talk, and then there's real talk, right? So, like, we could have church talk where we all say the right things that we're supposed to say, and you walk away from that with not one thing changing or being impacted. And I got to the place in my life where, all right, if I'm committing my time to show up to these things, I'm not just having church talk no more. Like, I need to be able to walk away with something that is meaningful to me that I can apply to myself. So that means I'm a cuss because I need to make it real for me. The piece of code switching, I guess, is what is the social norms of acceptance of, all right, we're having a meeting at church. Yeah, I'm not gonna be out here wilding and dropping F-bombs in the middle of the sanctuary. But if care group is being held at somebody's house or my house and it helps drive the message or the feeling that I have, then I'm a little bit more comfortable doing that, right? So I struggle with, like, it's one of those things where, again, in church, you should be respectful of the house that you're in. But how do you also have, in my opinion, authentic conversations within that space? So if church is intended to be the hospital where healing takes place, well, it's not always going to be pretty. Yeah. But we always try to make it pretty. Yeah. But I do think there should be some reverence about the space that you're in. You know what I mean?
It's funny you said, because I pledge, and my particular fraternity is, and I'm going to say it, and you'll know who it is, but it was like the pretty boy dressing up, suave. Yeah. I'm not. I can get pretty if I want to, but I'm not always like suit and tie all the time. And I almost got excommunicated. Like it was almost like, hey, you got to wear a suit every Thursday. And I was like, your suit. I'm wearing my hat and my J's, and I ain't doing it. But I did respect the idea of like. Caring for yourself, like taking care of your body. Make sure your stuff is on right. Mm-hmm. Make sure your pants ain't all the way down. Yeah. So to some degree, I did conform to the standard, if you will, of the rule, but I did not go all the way to, like I said, suit and ties and the pointy toe shoes and all that stuff. I just couldn't do it.
We relate 100%.
So, but I'm still in the fraternity. They still love me, and
y'all think so.
That's my authentic.
But it took some resistance to get them, right? Yeah. So, like, as a result of your actions or your defiance, if you will, as a culture, you guys grew.
Yep.
As a collective.
Yep. And you accept. Not just, you don't accept anything, because that's, again, where you get into chaos and you're not pushing things forward. However, you do respect some things.
So we got about 10, maybe 15 minutes. We talked a little about the reason. I think Pam brought up a point that I think we should spend a little bit more time on, is do we feel everybody code switches? And do we think there are certain groups that feel the need to code switch more? And I'm going to just point that in, and Pam, color that thought in a little bit more if you want, but I'm going to color it in for the sake of at least starting the conversation of, do we feel that certain communities and cultures feel the need to code switch to have some level of achievement? I don't want to say success, but to have some level of achievement.
Yes.
Can I say this?
You can say whatever you want. You're at the table.
Let's do it next week. Let's just say code switching part 2 in 2 weeks.
I'm with that. Do you think it's too big of a deal to have 15 minutes?
Well, no. We can do it in 15 minutes. Let's do it in 15 minutes. But if we see that there's
more appetite,
that'll be the docket, and then everyone must prepare 2 weeks to come to the table with something. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So the elephant in the room, I think most of us that are obviously all of us at the table, I'm gonna assume, are all African Americans, right?
Yes.
I'm trans.
You're trans.
I'm joking.
So we could speak from our experience as African Americans. I think we're all in corporate environments. So I think there's a shared camaraderie around. We've had to code switch, at least to get entry into said seats that we've occupied.
Yes. You have to.
Yes.
Do you believe that that's the same of all communities and all cultures?
No.
Why and why not?
Kelly, you said no first.
I'll use, for example, the Indian culture. My company is an IT-based company, so we have a lot of folks who specifically come here in visas from India. And
Sponsored visas.
Yes.
Which money is associated with sponsored visas, which is why I bring that up.
Okay.
There's dollars.
Yeah. So, a great group of people. I've learned a ton in terms of that. But the one thing that I admire is that they literally have come into our corporate situation not assimilating, not code changing to
Based off
achieve
your
some-
perception.
based off what I could see,
Yeah.
and that's truly only based off what I could see. In terms of just in terms of a lot that they do. But I actually had a conversation with one of the VPs over one of the divisions who is here on a visa from India, and I couldn't tell you specifically where. But that is one of the things that he said. He said he wanted to be in a place where he didn't feel like he or his family had to change, and he makes it a purpose. He's like, they've asked me to clean up my accent at times. I speak.
They asked him
So
to
he's
do that?
more clear on conference calls.
Uh-huh.
When they have, he's not just working with his developers. He said, I speak with a Harvard accent. But because he has the ability to reach his team, they won't ask, or they won't push the issue as much as, let's say, for instance, my hair. Kelly, you look so different this week. I.e., my hair's not pressed. I'm not, doing something that they're used to. So I think I admire that. I know some people have, their issues around certain things, but I admire it. Just the courage to say, no, this is what I am, and you're going to deal with it. But again, like Rob said, there are other stipulations around it where there's more flexibility for them that culture to operate in that way.
So let's stick with, I like that. I think a thought that came, accent. So we're all from the South. All
Yes.
grew up in North Carolina. How many?
I live there now.
Yeah.
Oh, that's dope. All right.
How many of us have gone, because we've all traveled, have taken our North Carolina drawl, that accent that North Carolina naturally has, right? Into places that, so say we've all been to California, right?
Mhm.
And so you from North Carolina, you're speaking to somebody in California. Irregardless that you're black, you happen to be from North Carolina, you're in California where I don't recognize an accent in California. That's why I picked California. And people, what you say?
Yeah.
Has that happened?
Yeah.
And I think that has zero to do because we're black,
Right.
but more to do we're from North Carolina. And there's a certain way in which we speak. So I will say the reason I bring that up is there's time that I moved away from North Carolina, 2005, 2004, 2005. My accent isn't as strong now, but there are still times that I say certain words and it comes out a certain way, and people at work will be like, Rob, what you say? And it's not because I'm black, it's because the North Carolina slang it comes out and they're like, I don't know what the hell you're saying. So that has forced me to have a heightened awareness of how I enunciate my words in a way that allows me to effectively communicate with others.
And then eventually you actually start to speak differently. Right. And then when you go back to Carolina, they like,
So the reason I bring that up is I think that big Indian example kind of what that brought to mind is I think sometimes it's not necessarily about code switching when it comes from a cultural standpoint, but it's about how do you do it to effectively communicate? Because there's a piece of us that we all could have we could have stuck so true to our roots of how we speak, but this is how I talk. Well, you staying true to your principles and how you talk is impacting your ability to communicate effectively with others.
Which then leads me to this, Dan. Because if the mass majority have to adjust just to understand you, it's just easier, man, if you just change the way you speak. Could that be a point? It's easier for you to change
for us, because all of us
have already This is what we do.
So you, one person from North Carolina moving to California, rather than you trying to get all of California to hear differently, you should just learn to speak like we speak.
Is that a point? And the reason why I won't push.
I agree with you 100%. That's the way I feel about when, and I know I might get some slack about this, but if I were to move to France, and I'm not learning French, I'm gonna speak English, and you just gonna learn.
But that's the American arrogance too.
Yeah.
But again, it's but our native language is English, and I'm not saying that because I don't appreciate others. I'm saying if I'm moving to America, you don't feel like there should be, this might be getting a whole nother topic, but in terms of code switching, is that not something where I should code switch in terms of this is where, in order to, I'm not saying assimilate, but in terms of just to under and operate where I am?
So I'm not going to disagree. What I would say is, in the principle of a perfect utopia,
right?
Theoretically, you would hope that the melting pot that we pride ourselves to be, or the potluck, as E.T. said, if others don't want to adapt to learning the language, the native tongue of English in its many forms, we should at least have the infrastructure to be able to still effectively communicate. Now, I use an example of, I've been to Asia more times than I can remember. I don't speak Cantonese nor Mandarin. But the way in which the city, Hong Kong specifically, is set up, I'm still able to navigate and effectively move around the city, even though I don't speak, because they've created things within the city that allow me to understand, one, what street I'm on, how to use the MTR, the rail system to move. So like, there are still things that allow me to still effectively maneuver within that city. So as many times as I've been, I've never felt the need or felt forced to learn Mandarin or Cantonese because I'm enabled, if you will, because of all the other provisions that they've created that have allowed me to be able to maneuver accordingly.
That's a great design.
It is.
But so I think the idea is, I think in a perfect world, whoever would come to the U.S. should have the opportunity to still be effective in maneuvering.
Right. I agree.
If he or she doesn't desire to learn English, right? So I always think about, you see the examples on parents don't speak English, but the kids do. So the kids effectively become their translators. But that investment that they made in their children have allowed them to protect essentially their native tongue, but to the sense that their kids stay here. Now their kids have kids. Their kids don't know the native tongue anymore. All they know is English, and there's a little piece of their culture that now been lost.
Yeah.
So, but who's right, who's wrong?
But that's true code switching. Like, I mean, literally.
Or the evolution.
And that goes back to the definition of, I mean, like that's evolution, but that's like embedded code.
That's more adaptation.
But in adapting, they've lost a little. So one could say the way in which I communicate is a part of my culture, right? So now that I've adapted to these Western norms, this U.S. American way, I've now lost the ability to communicate the way that my grandparents have. So again, I just go to grandparents moved here, have kids that are here. Kids are learning English and native tongue because they're essentially the translators. Their kids now have kids. Their kids are more, from what I've seen, are less prone to use the native tongue and are more applicable using English.
Yeah.
So then as you kind of go generation after generation, unless there's a conscious effort to maintain that, you eventually lose it. So we could say, yeah, they evolved, they adapted, but they've also, for argument's sake, have lost a little bit of who they are in the sense of the lineage in which they come from.
Okay, I'm going to flip that a little bit on argument's sake. But technically, those ancestors, aren't they American? Aren't they American? So hence, when they lose that dialect, technically...
I don't disagree. I just think that's where, for me, it kind of goes back to, and I know we haven't really talked about much. We talked about a lot, but haven't said a whole lot, is code switching versus assimilation versus kind of adapting and evolving, right? Because, again, I go back to, as a black man, entering into the corporate environment, I know, as we all kind of agreed upon, we had to present ourselves in a certain way in order to have some level of achievement. In order to get that interview, get that opportunity, there were certain things that we had to make that were, I don't want to say sacrifices, but we know we had to show up a certain way.
Right.
Fast forward, our children now theoretically will at least have a conscious effort of what they're going into, but there's a piece that they're probably losing a little bit of our potential culture by them not ever having to make that potential conscious decision to code switch.
You're absolutely
Because
right.
that's all they ever know.
Yeah.
Right. You're absolutely right.
So now our kids have kids. The whole idea of code switching is not even a thought because this is the new norm. So at what point does code switching effectively become the new norm? Is like, there's a long way of what I'm trying to get to.
And then, but the point of that is, we don't own that corporation and the way things are done. So we have to switch. Then we have to teach our kids in order to become successful or accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
You have to act and be. So you are losing yourself. You are that. To me, I know that's evolution, but if you had your own business, you wouldn't. Would you set it up that way? But then you would have to, because that's just again the way things are done.
Yeah, I think anytime, and I hate to, I think
And who
anytime,
owns it?
anytime that there's a interaction needed, meaning, so go back to the whole Chick-fil-A, right? If Chick-fil-A opens a store in one part of the city versus another part of the city, for them to be successful, they have their core principles, but they still have to adapt to the community that they're in, right? So I use the example, the Chick-fil-A that just recently opened up by us. The employees that work there are a little different than the employees that work at the Chick-fil-A across the city. So although the foundation of the principles are the same, there are pieces that business had to evolve in order to be successful. But we're at the hour. Kids just kind of raise it up. Yeah. To Joe's point, we weren't able to get through everything in 15 minutes, so there will be a part 2 of this.
I knew that.
So we'll keep the conversation going, so we won't close up, we won't wrap it up. In 2 weeks, we'll come back. So gather some more thoughts. Definitely keep the comments going. But yeah, let's keep the conversation going, because we didn't even really get to what happens when keeping it real goes wrong.
Yeah, because right now we're just kind of like just talking it out. Like,
Yep. So definitely appreciate you joining us, and like I said, keep the conversation going, and we will pick it up in 2 weeks. Thank you. And
invite somebody
in 2 weeks.
in 2 weeks.
Thanks for joining us, Kelly.
Not a problem.
Have a good evening.